Hello, and welcome back to another episode of Critical Reactions with your host, Bryan. We're going to continue on with this week's theme, exploring some classic rock and metal, anything pre 2000s. Now, technically, rock and metal weren't a requirement for the theme, but pretty sure everything this week is going to fall into one of those two categories. We're going to be looking at some Opeth right here from their Morning Rise album, which came out in 1996. This is track 2 off of it, called The Night and the Silent Water. That is such an Opeth title, isn't it? Oh man, let's dive into this, see what they're bringing to the table today. Ooh. Okay, it actually sounded like we lost the beat the first time through, but I think that's because of the rhythmic switch up that we get on the drums. So it almost started like a cannon between the acoustic and electric, but went into the direction of counterpoint instead. That's neat. I like this vibe between the two guitars. Static harmony at points, and then moving in opposite directions at others. The bass just laying down the foundation here alongside the bass kick. I really like this series of dyads here. It presents such a strong emotion. Very melancholic. And while I wouldn't say that this is gothic metal, it definitely evokes similar atmospheres or using similar harmonic devices. Interesting to put the intensity in the hi-hat like that. The 16th notes implies movement, but it's on a light instrument, so... But the hi-hat, like I said, it gives momentum, but the chords are cyclical. They don't explore anything else, it's just melancholy. Like a cycle of sadness. Such subtle differences between these two parts, and then of course the other guitar that's right here kind of providing the secondary foundation line to everything. interesting bass. I think it was just palm muting on that really bouncy tone that they're using on the bass. That was interesting about that previous line. Oh, a little bit of Phrygian thrown in there.
Your face was like the photograph painted white. We speak very often about it. What does it matter now? What does it matter now?
Interesting layering on the dual vocal lines. So I think this is the drum pattern from the intro. At least it's doing the same switch up in the last 25%. I really like this interlude here. Not only is it solemn, but also isolating. Just the two guitars, nothing around it. It's a very small, quaint section. Interesting movement into something totally flat, just a single chord. Interesting. Left side moves. So we have movement on the left, and then it stops. We have movement on the right, but it isn't, they don't trade exactly. They kind of overlap for a moment. clever. That's clever. Oh, what a journey. What I really like about that ending, we spend a lot of this song with singular ideas. Usually there's two guitars doing something together, but each guitar plays a monophonic melody. That is to say that they usually only play one note at a time. Despite having 6 strings, you can easily play chords on guitars. A majority of what we hear is both of them playing one note at a time, and any harmony coming from the duality of having both of these instruments playing a single note, creating these dyads or 2-note chords. I think there's 1 or 2 points where we hear a single guitar playing chords. Actually, we hear both guitars playing chords in that build-up starting around minute 8 or something like that on the acoustic that eventually became the single chord wall of sound monotonous metal part for the last minute. But again, they're playing chords with another instrument. There's very few sections in here that are totally isolating. And then we get at the end, through all of this melancholic, dreary atmosphere, we finally reach a point where we have a lone instrument harmonizing with itself, playing by itself. And I think that speaks volumes. To me, this song it's sad, right? It's dreary, it's melancholic, but it's always in company. Very rarely do we have any instrument in isolation, except the end. And where a majority of the time we have seen the instruments playing harmony with the instruments around it, we have these little dyads. Once again, just 2 notes at a time, being played by a single instrument. It no longer has anyone to harmonize with. And that's why I said right there in that fada, what a journey or something along those lines. Because to me it was this movement through sadness. Some parts were solemn, some parts were lonely. All parts were dreary, though. Nothing about this ever felt upbeat or energetic in any way, and most of the atmospheres, they had a melancholic tone to them, something that felt sad. When you bring that together with the tempo and the overall dreariness of it, it paints a very clear picture that I think it really cements in that final moment. I'm interested to read the lyrics on this one because, it wears its emotions on its sleeve here. I think it's almost impossible to listen to this song and walk away from it. Oh, I wonder what they were trying to make me feel. Nah, bro, this is just a sad song through and through. But the ideas of isolation, of loneliness, of melancholy in group. What does any of this have to do with the night and the silent water? What I like about both of those concepts is that they're both singular and vast. Water is not just a drop, at least even in the picture, it is a lake of some sort, maybe a river. The night is not one speck of darkness, it is the vastness of all darkness. They are both singular and vast entities. And so they are both lonely, isolated, singular, and within company simultaneously all the time, permanently. So it's going to be interesting how they might work with the themes that they wrote musically, with what I perceive to be the themes of the title, and how they're going to develop a lyrical story out of all of that. Now, haven't really talked too much about the intricacies of the music yet. Mostly broad strokes here about atmosphere and emotion and stuff like that. But I do want to talk about what I think is the key elements of this song. But first, I want to speak about how we discover that's the key element. And it's the guitars. You might have figured that out already, but I want to start from the reverse and work our way there. What is the bass doing in all of this? Honestly, a lot of pedal tone. Pedal tone and rhythms usually following along with the bass kick. This is pretty typical stuff for rock and metal bass guitar. It's not anything, outside the bounds of normal playing here. But I do like the tone of the bass guitar. It has a roundness to it. It's not really pointed. It's not punchy. That's definitely not the term I would use for it. Funky basses tend to have a bit more punch to it, where it almost feels like there's a lot of immediate presence to the note, and then it fades off. It tapers off quickly. When I say that this has a bounciness or a roundness to it, it kind of quickly fades into the note, hangs up here for a little bit, and fades back down. Not like a box or like a point, but kind of rounded, right? It's the way that the tone sounds like it would be shaped based on how the tone becomes and how it fades out. And I find that to be a really interesting tone, not because of the tone itself. There's really only two types of bass tones. You either have punchy or round. I'm sure there's some other ones, but those are the two most commonly used ones. But it's actually, I think it's a type of, I don't know, compression maybe that's put on it. Maybe it's the overdrive. But when it's palm muted, it has a very specific tone to it. And I don't even know how to describe it. It caught my ear once, and I was like, wow, that's a wild bass sound. And they used it all throughout the song. It's very cool. I like it. And I do think it comes from having this rounded, rocky / metallic bass tone. It is a bit more distorted. It is very present. It is very loud. And when, I don't know, based on the way they shape it, when they palm mute it, it has a very interesting tone to it that I don't think I've heard before. And it took me a second to realize it was the bass. And if this was a different band that had a plethora of instruments, they didn't just stick with the 4 instruments in a rock band, I might have been really confused. But, narrowing it down, there's 2 guitars, a drum, and a vocals. It's none of those, so it's got to be the bass, right? But it's a cool tone right there. But aside from that moment, the bass never really did anything that caught my attention, that struck me as interesting. It is very much a foundational instrument. It is what everything else is built on top of. They have a very necessary part of the song building, but it's not what's going to stand out. Then we have the drums. I don't know if you listen to the drums. There's not a lot going on there either. Much like the bass, it's very functional. The drums give us rhythm, using some patterns that occasionally veer off into the interesting, such as the first one giving us, I think it was 6 bars of a pretty straightforward idea, and then inverting the pulse on the last 2 bars of the 8-bar phrase, giving us this syncopation against the downbeat for those last 8 beats. It's interesting. The beginning is less so. That little ending is a bit more so. That's how the drums like to work. If not within a single idea, then within the larger work, where some sections will be a bit more straightforward with their patterns, and then maybe after 2 straightforward sections, they'll have a new pattern that will be a bit more eclectic or progressive. Those I tended to like more, but they were still not too interesting because the song is still designed to be very flat, not to have a lot of drive or bounce or energy to it. And so the drums don't really have a lot of leeway in doing interesting ideas because they need to do what the song needs. And so the drums end up feeling very straightforward, which usually I praise it. Well, I think I praise later Opeth's drum work. I don't think we've listened to a lot of early Opeth. So yeah, you guys will have to let me know. Does the drummer get more interesting as the years go on? Or is it just something that happened on this song and maybe other tracks on this album, have that same sort of experimental energy that I expect from Opeth? Regardless, it's very functional in this track and it does what the song needs, not going overboard for the performer's ego, if they have one, I don't know. But definitely keeping things in line for what's best for the art. And I can always appreciate that. And the last instrument that isn't the guitar is the vocals. And there's like one growl with like a little bit of a pitch change. It can kind of like to a lower growl and a slightly higher growl. There's really not a lot of difference there. And that's it. That's all the vocals do. We do have the whispers at the end. That's less singing and more speaking, but I also view that more as a production trick, pushing the vocals out of the center to the outsides, having that big reverb on them. It's a very cool effect. I really like that, but it's less about the vocalist at that point and more about the production of that section. So yeah, those 3 instruments, they don't really do a lot that is ear-catching. Extremely necessary to craft the song. Every single one of their roles is important, but not particularly wild. So that takes us to the guitars. And to me, this is what draws me into the track. Otherwise, it would just be a dreary, melancholic, gothy style song. Not much of interest, but the guitars, they're always testing the bounds on what to do in the most tasteful way. I think that's the best part about them. We heard something that alluded to a canon, which is when 2 parts play the same thing, but phased out of time. So maybe this instrument will play the first bar, and then when they get to bar 2, the other instrument's going to play the first bar, and they're always going to be a bar behind each other. And you can always add another instrument on that, and that'll be even further behind, that kind of stuff. But we had a little bit of that at the beginning, but it actually turned into counterpoint. So they started on a canon for like 2 bars, and then went to counterpoint, which is where they both play different things that complement each other. I thought that was wildly cool. We have a lot of dyad work in here, which is what I already talked about. But what's cool is that we don't have static harmony, where we might have a root tone and then 1/3 up, and then keeping that gap consistent no matter the note. In a lot of the places, we'll have the static harmony, where they're always the same distance apart. But after a couple of notes, they'll start going in different directions, changing the distance between the notes, changing the relationships to the notes, and through all that impacting the emotion that we're listening to. Because when the distance between the notes is the same, and you're kind of working with the same atmosphere, it kind of ends up feeling like you're just playing the same chord over and over. And so changing the gap between the 2 notes, it helps allow the emotion and the harmonic element to feel more dynamic. And they do a great job of that. The guitars, they have melodies, they have chords that they play. Sometimes they move into the atmospheric. We saw a bit of this towards the end where we're just getting a series of chords. especially on the build-up in the last 2 minutes, really building the atmosphere, the intensity of it, without really playing anything that is melodically interesting. And, the vocals aren't in every section of the song. Granted, when they are present, the guitars don't really relax at all. They continue to do their lead stuff. I think that's primarily because the vocals aren't melodically driven, they're rhythmic and textural, but also when the vocals aren't present, which is a big majority of this track, the guitars are really the only thing that can take that spotlight. As I mentioned, everything else is a bit functional. It's behind the scenes. It's there to set the stage for the lead component, which is consistently in this song, the guitars. And so what I find really interesting is that they can continue to create these new ideas, and it seems like they just never run out of them. I don't know. It's wild how many riffs and ideas and counterpoints and melodies they can come up with. And it feels like despite playing the same feeling throughout the whole song, they never really run out of ideas that keep the song moving forward. I find that really interesting and kind of envious. If I were to write an 11-minute song full of brand new ideas, I'd probably be spent for a few days while I have to recoup and noodle out some ideas again. And Opeth, it seems like they just keep chugging along. I don't know, some bands, they can pop out riffs. It feels like they're just riff machines. Opeth, at least in this case, I'm just going to call them a melody machine. And I just find that really awesome. But to me, the song is it's just that. Atmosphere and melody. And I kind of went over how the atmosphere changes but never alters a little bit in that first section. I mean, that to me it's the song. It's singular in focus, but multiple in execution. And I think that's why it's lasted as long as it has. And kind of Opeth in general continues to do that too. They might change up what kind of music they're making, but at the core of it, they're still Opeth. Minor changes in execution, but keeping that singular focus in the foundation. And I think this song is a really great, focused explanation of how Opeth has survived all these years and continue to be a band that people look forward to look forward to listening to new music of. Which they just had an album out, right? Yeah, Last Will and Testament, which came out November 20. Yeah, dude, literally just came out. Usually I'm a few months off because like my perception of time's garbage, and I'll be like, it just came out. It's like 6 months ago. It's like, geez, I really thought it was recent, but no, this is quite a recent release. Let me read some lyrics on The Night in the Silent Water and see how any of what I've taken in about the music and themes and title might work into what they were trying to say with the song, at least lyrically. Well, lyrically, the song seems to be about the passing of someone, and I think more in particular the last few days of this person's life from the perspective of the narrator, who is someone close to them. It says, "And so you left us, jaded and gaunt some September, wilted with the seasons, but hidden inside the delusion I saw your eyes. Somewhere, devoid of death, the aura poises amidst the storm. In solid tears I linger, a parlor glade, moonlit sorrow." And so the idea of wilting with the seasons, as it says that this person passed in September, we were going into autumn, and that their quality of life was fading just as fast as the trees were with the season. It says that after he passed, in solid tears I linger. This person was very harshly affected by the passing of this person. Later on says, "Am I like them, those who mourn and turn away, those who would give anything to see you again, if only for another second?" I think this is really interesting because we see portrayals of grief in pop culture. And we see portrayals of grief sometimes in people around us. Maybe our friend uh, loses someone important in their life. And you don't really have much of a connection to that person. It doesn't really impact you too much, but you see their grief. And here, he says, would I be like the others? Is my grief going to be similar to what I've seen elsewhere? I think that's interesting because everybody battles grief differently. But at the end of the day, I think that these two are pretty common things to do. Now, one is just to bury it. It says mourn and then turn away. Just try to forget about it as much as you can. Maybe you turn to substance abuse, or maybe just go really hard into work or projects so you don't have to think about it. But he also asks if he would be one who would try to bargain. I'd give anything for another second. I think that's something that a lot of people do. I think it's really hard not to fall into that. Even as ready as you might be able to be for the passing of someone, having them back would be great, right? I'm not too sure about the end, though. We have a little 6-line stanza. I think this is the whispered part. It says, cloak of autumn shroud, I gaze, dim ricochet of stars. I reckon it's time for me to leave. You sleep in the light, yet the night and the silent water still so dark. Unless this is a way of saying that, I don't know, you've gone on to a better place, you're in the afterlife now, whatever that might be, and yet the place that you've left behind is dark. It's brought sorrow upon those who you've impacted. Trying to reconcile that, the peace of death mixed with the grief for the living. What I like most about the lyrics, I think, is the complexity of it. There's also a strong element of beauty to it. It's a very poetically written set of lyrics, which is enticing for me. I always love visually charged words. But I also enjoy how it's not just, you passed and I'm sad and I cried and why aren't you here anymore? It's just like this very direct concept. It's more, in a sense, it's melancholically philosophical, which is a phrase I don't think I'd ever say in my life. It's multifaceted, I think, is what I'm getting at here. And I think that matches the music. The vibe is melancholic throughout. There's no way to walk away from this song without understanding it's dreary. It makes sure that is solidified in every moment of the song, but how it approaches that, how it represents it, that changes. That's where the nuanced writing comes in. How every section's different than the other, still focusing on creating something sad and heavy, but doing it in a different way. And I think that represents a lot of what the song is going for. But of course, the ending. I had a very different read on it, but I think it's obvious that this person feels that they've been left alone here now that this other person has passed, and that's where we get the solo guitar in the final 40 seconds of the track. They're grieving alone. Maybe the person that they have grieved with during times of losing other important people in their life has been with this person who is now gone. Now, the annotation here does say that the song is about the singer's grandfather who died during the recording of this album. That has to be ridiculously hard to get through writing the album. And I think that definitely explains the heavy melancholy in this track. You're not just reopening a wound, this is a fresh one. But nothing in the song really leans towards that. It's more of an open-ended song, and I like that. He could have really made this a personal track, and I'm sure that some of the lines in here are personal. There's some phrases in here, and it is particularly about, at the end, standing beside this pond, being trapped in the night alongside the still water. There is a phrase talking about moondogged lakes earlier on, a lonely resting pool. So maybe there are some elements here that are very personal, but unless you know what those phrases might represent, the song ends up being very universal, I think, about dealing with the loss of a loved one. Yeah, those are my thoughts. Opeth's The Night and the Silent Water. It comes together really well. It's not something I would want to revisit too often. It's one of those things I'd have to be in the mood for. But Opeth has always been kind of hit and miss with me. Some things are just really great and others are fine. But I think this is one that I would put in the really great category for Opeth. And what's funny is I think I enjoyed this a lot more than some of their wilder, more progressive things that y'all have given me. That are probably infinitely more popular too. I really think this might be one of my favorite Opeth tracks to date. Anyways, like I was saying, these are my thoughts though. Night in the Silent Water. Let me know yours. What do you think of this track? Is there anything that stood out to you? Anything that you would like to add on to the conversation or maybe correct me on if I misspoke about something? Maybe just have your own interpretation of the track. Put all that stuff and whatever else you want to write in the comment sections. Above that, in the description box. You ever had your brain just just die out for a second and you just start looping the last thing you thought about? You come out of it and you're like, whoa, that was weird. It's like getting stuck in an if for loop. Oh yeah, the description box. There's a link in there for Linktree. Takes you here. You can find links to my music, ways to support the channel, a link to the Discord server, and so much more. Above that, are you kidding? What in the world? Like, subscribe, and ring the bell. Even the computer's losing out right now. I really don't know what's going on here. Anyways, I'm going to wrap this up before something else really breaks. That wraps it up for today. I'll be back tomorrow, 5 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, 10 p.m. UTC as usual. Until next time, remember to be critical, not cynical, of the music you listen to, and have a fantastic morning, afternoon, or evening, whenever you choose to watch my videos.